If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Welcome to episode 228 of the Leading Learning Podcast, in which we revisit a topic that plays an important role in our work, virtual conferences.
And it plays a big role in our work because we've done a lot of research and writing about virtual conferences. We published the Virtual Events Report, but also because we are practitioners of virtual conferences. And in fact, we're just wrapping up our own conference, the Learning Technology Design Annual Virtual Conference that we hold. So the topic is really top of mind for us right now.
Now, often after we complete an event, we'll do an after-action review. But this time around, we're not going to do that. Instead, we want to talk more generally about virtual conferences because we feel like we're really past time for more learning businesses to make them a serious part of their portfolio of offerings.
So if you want to check out those past after-action reviews, we'll link to those in the show notes, and you can definitely access those. But again, this time we're going to talk more generally about virtual conferences. And as we usually do, we'll pose a couple of reflection questions here at the beginning. And the first is, whether as a plan A or a plan B, how might a virtual event fit into your portfolio? And then secondly, if you're already offering virtual events, should they become a bigger part of your portfolio?
Now, we'll note that we refer to virtual conferences, and when we say that, what we mean are not just one-off webinars. We use the term really to be much broader, and in fact, I'll share the definition that we use in the Virtual Events Report. A virtual event is a web-based event that replicates many aspects of a traditional place-based conference, membership meeting, or trade show. It may take place on a standalone basis or in conjunction with a place-based conference, and those are called hybrid events. Virtual events feature multiple sessions, not just a single webinar or webcast, and may include keynote presentations, training and education workshops, discussion areas, social networking opportunities, exhibit areas for vendors, and various other features. And activities in a virtual event may take place in real time, so synchronously, on demand, so asynchronously, or some combination of the two. I'll also note that we tend to use the term virtual event and virtual conference pretty interchangeably. We also know that other people sometimes prefer to call these online conferences or online events.
And so a key question for the purposes of this episode is, why consider doing one of these now? And we've offered a number of reasons before for offering a virtual conference. And in fact, in episode 135, we went through a few of them. This time around, we want to offer some additional reasons that seem particularly timely right now.
So I think at the top of that list is that a virtual conference can help you prepare for what could become a necessity. So think about things like viruses. Coronavirus, as we're recording, is making all the headlines. There are weather issues. Could be everything from snow to tornadoes to flooding. And so all of those things are just part of the world in which we live. And by going virtual, it means that those types of occurrences, illnesses, travel, changes in travel availability, weather issues, all of those have a much less of a chance of impacting your event. And in fact, Ray Schroeder opened our Learning Technology Design virtual conference this year. And one of the things that he talked about at the outset was just the impact of the coronavirus on learning and how organizations that are providing education and professional development and learning opportunities need to be prepared, have to be thinking about that.
And as you mentioned, weather can be an issue as well. We've definitely worked with clients where, they've had to actually cancel their entire annual event because of flooding happening. Flooding is becoming much more of an issue these days, and other types of weather events. And I mean, it's obviously not going to be ideal to have to totally replace your place-based conference with a virtual conference, but to potentially have that as a backup and or to be adding virtual conferences into your portfolio so you're not as dependent on that one annual event, that can be a significant strategic move to make these days. So something to think about more and more. Now, another reason is that if you've never offered a conference type event before, it tends to be much more viable and a less risky approach to stand up a virtual conference. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't take a lot of work. We can vouch for the fact that it does in fact take a lot of work to stand up a good virtual conference. But, you don't have to deal with food and beverage. You don't have to deal with the risk of having committed to hotel room blocks. You don't have to convince people to commit to travel to wherever you're going to be holding the event. So there's just a lot about standing up a virtual conference if you've never done a conference before, or if you want to add another event to your portfolio that can be, quite a bit easier and less risky on a certain level than doing another face-to-face event.
What I think tied to that point you made about convincing people to travel, one of the other benefits of a virtual event is that it can open you up to an international audience in a very meaningful way. Folks who might not be able to or willing to fly halfway around the globe suddenly might be interested in attending something that they can attend online without actually leaving their home or their office.
And I think in the world we live in today, too, I mean, many people listening may not be thinking of their learning business or their organization as an international organization, but that potential is there for every learning business now. I mean, particularly once you get online and are putting your content out there, I mean, if you're serving a field or industry that has interest around the world, which, I mean, so many do, by making that conference virtual, by making an event accessible via the web, via the internet, you are opening yourself up to tap into that potential of being an international organization. So it can really open up new strategic possibilities for you. And the leaders of most learning businesses, of most organizations, need to be thinking about that these days.
I also think that going with a virtual approach gives you more possibilities when it comes to who can lead sessions. We were just talking about that international audience in terms of who can participate in sessions, and actually even beyond the international audience, just the fact that there are going to be people even not that far from wherever your home base is who just may not be in a position to travel, even if it's not from another country. But in terms of who can lead sessions, it also has an impact there. And I think all across the board, from kind of the type of keynoter you might be able to bring in, because suddenly that keynoter doesn't actually have to travel for a day, be there for a day, and then travel, another day, which obviously means they have sort of limited slots like that on their calendar every year. But it also, all across the spectrum, those practitioners. So again, the folks who might be very willing to lead a session, but perhaps don't have the budget or the schedule flexibility to travel to present at a place-based conference. Suddenly they might be able to do that if that is them joining remotely from their office.
And I think both of those have been so important for us. I mean, we focus a great deal on practitioners at Learning Technology Design. We really want to get people who are on the front lines of what they're doing to be able to lead sessions for the event. And like you said, Celeste, I mean, in many cases, they may not be able to break away to do that because they are frontline practitioners. This is what they have to be doing day to day. So this gives them an opportunity to do that. But then on the, the more sort of keynote front, anybody who's written a book these days, who's in a sort of a major visible position and is going to be in demand for those, $10, $15, $20, $25,000 keynotes, you might be able to get those people at a virtual event for considerably less because we all appreciate the fact of not having to travel these days when that's a possibility. And, if you're somebody who has something valuable to say, who has a platform, who has a book, whatever the case might be, and you're going to have the ability to reach an audience without having to leave the comfort of your home potentially, that can be very attractive. And you may end up being able to get somebody to keynote for a virtual event or do a major session for a virtual event that you might not be able to afford or realistically be able to get for a face-to-face event. So definitely keeping that in mind and those possibilities for who's going to be able to be there to lead and to keynote at your virtual event. Another thing that we've found about virtual events is that they have so much potential alongside communities, and particularly online communities. And we expect to see this really solidify as a trend going forward, because launching a virtual event can really be the catalyst for starting or igniting a virtual community, and then vice versa. If you've got a good online community going, that can be a fantastic basis for then bringing everybody together in a very concentrated way around a virtual event. So we're starting to see more and more that these things go hand in hand. We've done some of this with learning technology design. Particularly a couple of years ago, we did an extended virtual event where we really focused on community as part of that event. But now we're starting to look at, how do we extend the community indefinitely beyond the virtual conference. And I think there's just so much potential there that has not been tapped into yet to get that focused community to extend out over time, and then to bring it back together periodically over time as part of that focused virtual event.
And I think that online community can be part of how we make real this idea that learning is not an event, but a process.
Yeah.
And so that we have those ways to continue to engage around ideas and topics. And the community is there to support that. I think another reason to seriously think about virtual events, if you haven't already, is just because of the environmental impact of place-based events. And this is something that we raised in our annual Trends webinar that we held in December 2019. But basically, a big place-based conference that involves people coming together, flying to get there, that creates a huge carbon footprint for that event. And there's really no way around it, because just the flying alone, those carbon emissions, they're sort of baked into that event. And so, even if you're using, biodegradable, plasticware or, non-plasticware at the event, you can't kind of erase those plane emissions.
Yeah, and we're starting to hear a lot more about this from the events industry. So a real effort to try to become more eco-friendly and green, try to have those more sustainable events. But I mean, as you're saying, once you've got flying involved, once you've got hotels and food and beverage and all of that stuff involved, you're already heading towards something that is only so sustainable when it comes right down to it. And, the United Nations recently released their latest emissions gap report, which, that paints a pretty dire picture if we don't change our behavior. And of course, one of those behaviors we could change is eliminating or reducing our use of air travel. And I don't have stats on it here to offer, but we know just the size of the events industry that so many people are flying to so many places to meet, to have these, sort of concentrated face-to-face events annually. And, we don't expect those to go away. That's human nature. People want to get together in person. They want to be there face-to-face and see each other. But it just seems inevitable that's going to be reduced some, if not significantly, and we need good, viable alternatives to that. And effective virtual conferences and other types of virtual events are, one of the most obvious alternatives to doing that.
So just as a quick recap, the points that we raised around the potential benefits of going virtual with a conference is that it can help you prepare for what could become a necessity. So this is where we were talking about viruses and weather-related issues, and so this can be either a plan A or a plan B to help deal with that. And
obviously, those things are not going away. I mean, we know we live in a world where the types of viruses like the coronavirus, unfortunately, are probably going to continue to occur and emerge. And we know that the weather issues are going to continue to occur and emerge.
Jeff, as you shared, if you are thinking about starting a conference, taking a virtual approach can actually be much easier and less risky. So if you've never offered a conference before, or if you're thinking about adding a new conference offering to your portfolio, by going virtual, you can eliminate some of the risks of, hotel contracts and room blocks and food and beverage and all of that. It also can open you up to an international audience and really just an audience in general who might not be able to travel to wherever your event is held, whether or not it's an international audience or not.
And that's a good point, because we emphasized international, but we know that for most organizations that are holding any sort of face-to-face conference right now, they're probably reaching somewhere maybe 15 to 25% of their audience if they're lucky. Some are reaching more, but most are reaching less even than that.
It also opens up possibilities for who can lead sessions. And again, that kind of runs the gamut from the keynote level speaker down to the practitioner, just by the fact that they don't have to make the same level of investment in time away from work and the rest of their life. Suddenly presenting may become something much more appealing or just manageable for them. And then, Jeff, you were pointing out around the benefits of coupling a virtual event with online community and really getting that sort of virtuous circle going, where you have the excitement and content and ideas from the virtual event feeding into discussions in the online community there, where people get to continue that conversation. So it does take it beyond the event, beyond how many ever days of sessions you might have, and really does get it closer to learning being that process, not an event.
Virtual and virtuous. I like that.
And then the final point was just around the environmental impact of place-based conferences, and so how virtual can be lighter on the environment.
And so those are our thoughts at this point on virtual events, virtual conferences. They've been a big part of our business. We've been deeply immersed in them for years, as we noted at the beginning, both because we do research, and you can get our virtual events report. We'll make sure there's a link to that. That is free via Tagoras, and we'll send you in the right direction for that if you will visit the show notes for the episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 228. And then, of course, we have been practitioners of virtual events with Learning Technology Design, which we just wrapped up for 2020, but we do certainly hope to continue as an event. And if you want to find out more about that and be able to sign up to be notified for the future, you can go to ltd.leadinglearning.com for more information. And of course, the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 228 will include the reflection questions that we posed at the beginning. And those are, whether as a plan A or plan B, how might a virtual event fit into your portfolio? And then secondly, if you're already offering virtual events, virtual conferences, should they become a bigger part of your portfolio?
When you check out the show notes, you'll see various options for subscribing to the podcast. And if you're getting value out of what you hear, Jeff and I would be truly grateful if you would subscribe, as it helps us get some data on the impact of what we're doing.
And we'd also be grateful if you take just a minute to give us a rating on Apple Podcast. Just go to leadinglearning.com/Apple. That'll put you in the right place. Celeste and I personally appreciate your rating and review, and those reviews and ratings help the podcast show up when people search for content on leading a learning business.
Finally, consider following us and sharing the good word about Leading Learning. You can find us on Twitter by going to leadinglearning.com/Twitter, on Facebook at leadinglearning.com/Facebook, and on LinkedIn at leadinglearning.com/LinkedIn. We also encourage you to use the hashtag #LeadingLearning on each of those channels. However you do it, please follow us and help spread the word about leading learning.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.